Welcome to the latest episode of The Special Sauce. Today, we're joined by Verge Des Neves, who is the Vice President of Australia for Boyd & Moore Executive Search. Originally from South Africa, Verge has been in Australia for the last 10 years, and throughout his career, has also worked obviously in South Africa and the UK, specialising in executive search. Having spent the last 15 or so years in executive search, Verge has built a strong network across the space, and you may have also seen his content around LinkedIn. Verge, welcome to The Special Sauce.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here, mate. And today, what we're going to be covering is all things exec search. So something we've never covered off on The Special Sauce.
Yeah, new topic for us.
Which is exciting. So we'll understand a bit about the difference between exec search and retained recruitment, the different functions within exec search, understanding deal times, processes. How do you even begin to build a network in that space? That's what I'm really, really keen to understand. The art of saying no, and then what the future holds for exec search.
Well, I hope I can do the industry a favor.
Good. and look, Chris and I were talking about this yesterday, I think, in the preparation for this podcast. Yeah. The catch up that we had a few weeks ago, you know, Chris and I have both been in recruitment for longer than we would probably admit to. But I think even for us, having been in the industry for that long, it was such an eye-opening conversation. And I don't know, like I think perhaps for a lot of recruiters who aren't in your world, there's a perception, and maybe perception versus reality are totally different for so many different reasons. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, just on that, take us through. I think that you're right. There's a bunch of misconceptions out there in terms of what exec search actually is. Take us through it. You know, what is it? And guess what's that difference between, you know, exec search in your space and that sort of retained?
Yeah. It's a big question, Chris, because there is a huge, and there always has been a misconception as to where it starts and when it stops. You know, in our world, there's contingent, there's retained, there's exec search, and there's a couple of other things that go in between. Where I look at and where I position and where I have always positioned myself in exec search is really at the level where it's critical enough that if you get it wrong, the business could fold. All right. So if you look at it that way, and it's no disrespect to any other opportunities or roles or anything else in a business, but if that critical C-suite role, if you don't do it right, or if the board doesn't do it right, or if the C-suite doesn't do it right and they make the wrong hire, they could seriously go backwards. And that's where I pitch, and that's where I see exec search doing really well, and that they have done well over the years. Now that could, and I hate putting levels on it, because everyone says, you know, exec search starts at 200 or 300 or 400K, whatever it is. It's impossible to look at it that way, because you can hire a CEO at a not-for-profit, which only takes in $10 or $20 million a year. But there's no difference in that process of a CEO at the not-for-profit than it might be the CEO of a $500, $600, $700 million business. It's still a critical executive hire. Now, that CEO at that not-for-profit might only be a $300,000 role, might be less, but it doesn't take away from the critical leadership element of that role. So, and I think that's where potentially a lot of the organizations, recruitment firms, big end-of-town search firms sometimes get it wrong, is that they would only look at the top end of town because that's where they think exec search is. And I think that's where sometimes the misconception from recruitment companies that, you know, are maybe a little bit more transactional or contingent find themselves looking at, okay, it's just the top end of town where that happens. But more and more over the years, it's happening at different levels of business size, but it just comes down to that critical leadership piece, which I think is the main thing to focus on.
Yeah. And so, you know, we see a lot of agencies out there that, let's say, have an exec search arm or team. What would be the difference between, I guess, that versus what goes on day to day in a I guess just a pure exec search firm, you know, the big boys of the industry, so to speak.
The dark arts. Yeah. I would find it tough working in a traditional recruitment company that has an exec search arm, because the business models are just so different. So trying to pitch your value add to a client who has always known you as a transactional contingent recruitment firm, and you're very good at doing that piece of work, to then go and speak to that CEO and say, oh, by the way, we've got an exec search arm as well. The two models are just so vastly different in terms of the people on the ground, the research that happens in the background, the high touch points at every single level within the business. You need teams behind you to be able to do that. And it's just impossible for one person running an exec search arm at a business to be able to do it well and right. So I'm not saying they don't do it well and right. I just find it sometimes the positioning and the communication around it might get a little bit gray in the client world and in the company world. So sometimes you got to look at it and go, which one are you? Where are you going to focus? Because each area needs specific focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talked a bit about there just around, teams in the background and research. And I think that's something that people, that don't understand exec search or haven't had exposure to it.
Yeah.
See, right?
There's a big mothership in the background.
Talk to us about that. I guess what's involved in the background that we don't see.
Oh, I mean, there's so much involved even before you win a mandate, right? There's data centers, insights, benchmarking in the background. It's market analysis, due diligence from teams out in Asia or wherever it might be based. I'm talking about us, for instance. And that's only just to get a meeting with a client, right? So when I first started my foray into search many, many years ago, the gray is starting to show. This actually works, by the way, in boardrooms. Yeah.
At least
right.
same thing. Getting a few, but I'm still on the right side of 40.
Yeah. So when I got into exec search a few years ago, my managing director at the time said to me, if you fail to plan to fail. And that's something that has stuck with me ever since then, because it was a huge part of what made them super successful. They had been around for 50 odd years. They were in 50 odd different countries. And that's how they approached every single meeting with a client, is that they went into super intense amount of detail into everything about that person and the business so that they knew what to expect when they went in. And I've carried that through. But if you're only, for instance, one or two people trying to play in that world, it's very hard to do that every single time, because you're managing delivery, you're managing BD, you're managing relationships, managing all the admin that comes with it. And you just can't give that incredible high touch point for your clients or if your potential clients in the future. And that's where this big machine comes into the foray in the background, is that while I'm sitting here, for instance, the machine is running. The researchers are talking to candidates. They're putting lists together. We've got an intelligence center out in Asia who's putting the long lists and marketing mapping together, the target list of companies. They're doing research on all the meetings that I've got coming up next week, so that I am fully prepared to go in there to have the best conversation possible with the right people, right? And it comes down to, people buy from people. You've got to be able to use that information in the best way possible. But without the machine happening in the background, a lot of what I am able to do then going forward with clients and candidates just can't happen, because there's only so much time in the day for you to be able to do, right? And that's just leading up to winning an assignment, right? Then you've won the assignment, and then the machine kicks in. It's a different part of the machine, because then it's the briefing, it's the project coordination from the admin teams. The researcher and the project team comes together to start mapping the market for talent. And it really is, it's a complete market map. If you're looking for a CEO or a CFO from financial services industry, financial services is huge. There's banking, there's non-banking, insurance, superannuation, wealth, you name it. We've got to go and find all of those people so we have them on the map so we don't miss anyone. And we make sure that we try and have conversations with everyone so that we are able to get a holistic view of who's out there, what they're looking for, and how to go about getting them to come across and have a conversation.
Yep.
And we all know this, to try and get into a CFO's diary is tough because they've got other people contacting them. And that's what comes from that professional networking piece ahead of time.
Mm.
You know, again, I've got this machine going in the background where I've got them mapping every single CFO on the ASX 300 because I'm going to meet every single one of those over a 12-month period. I've got to know who they are, what they're doing, why should they meet me, right? If I had to go and do that research myself, even if I use AI, I still have to do it myself. Take hours and hours and hours to get into that.
Yep.
Whereas while I'm sitting here, the machine's running. So that's just a snippet of the people and the insights in the background that make executive search. And that's what clients are paying for. You know, they're not paying, at the end of the day, you're getting a bum on a seat, but it's so much more than just that. It's the process that gets you there. It's about managing risk along the way to make sure that you've got the absolute right person. And it's not just the most available person, right? Anyone can put a job advert up on LinkedIn or Seek or whatever, and people can apply. That's the most available person. It's the person who's actually very good at their job that hasn't got any time to apply to LinkedIn or Seek, but you have networked and you know those people, and it's a warm call when you phone them.
Yeah. Just on that, like you mentioned about the research that goes into it and the people that are part of that machine, right? Like a lot of agencies will have resources or people doing market mapping or whatever else. This function that you have within the firm, like within your firm or where you've worked previously, this is a bit different to what a lot of agencies do in terms of, hey, we've got a junior or a rookie, let's put them in a resourcer role and then put them into a 360. Yeah. I've spoken to people in these kind of roles before. They're not junior, they've been around. Tell us, I guess, kind of, a bit more about that profile and what these people do and what they look like from an experience perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question because I think it comes down to market credibility. We've all been on the other side of a phone call from a grad, and you've taken the call from them. And again, no disrespect, but they just don't have the experience and the scars that go with 15, 20 years of doing this day in and day out. And that kind of researcher within an exec search firm, those are the people that are making those first calls. They know their industry in and out because they've lived and breathed it for 20 years. They know the people who to call. And every time I speak to executives who are going onto the market and I say to them, have you spoken to any of these firms? And they say, yeah, we've spoken to one person at that firm. Like, you're not doing enough. If you don't know the researcher's name at that firm, you're never going to get a foot in the door because they're always the first person that contacts you for a job. So you've got to know who they are so you can get on top of their list. And they're the ones who are going to get you into the diary of the senior partner who's running that search. So they are at the forefront of what's happening at the job market, coal end of it. So when you look at that, you go, okay, how much does a 22, 23-year-old have experience-wise of networking, of getting out there and talking to the right people? And I think that only comes with, 15, 20, 25 years of experience behind you in that market, knowing the market inside and out. And that type of researcher is gold. And I don't care how much people talk about AI and the introduction of technology and everything else. I would pay that researcher hundreds of thousands of dollars if they save me time and if they're able to connect me to the right type of person at the right time.
Chris, get ready for the influx of recruiters looking to become researchers. I reckon.
Just on that, take us through, not from a research perspective, but, into how did you even get into exec search?
Oh my
How do
gosh.
people even, not just you, but how does,
it's not as hard as people
how
say.
how do you even get into it? Do you need
Yeah.
any qualifications? Do you need, what industry experience? How does it work?
The barriers to entry to recruitment in general are quite low, right? You need a mobile phone, a LinkedIn account, and half a brain, right? And you can make this work.
It's
a great
half and half this one, right? So,
you guys are you're all the way there. You're good. But it's the beauty of the industry as a whole is it's great for entrepreneurs wanting to do well for themselves and for their families. Getting into exec search, I don't think there's a huge barrier for it. I just think you have to be able to have a different type of conversation with the client, realizing that potentially nothing will come back from it for a long time. Because building trust at the top end takes a long time to do that. I'll give you an example. I only started working with a client recently that I've been meeting. I don't know how many coffees I've had with her, breakfasts, lunches, events, wines after work. It's been 7 years of building that relationship and building the trust. Eventually, she gave me a shot to work on something. So it takes time to be able to do it. And every single time you're meeting with this client or a company or someone from the organization, you've got to be able to add more value to that conversation. Otherwise, what's the point of meeting? So it takes a lot of time to network, to build the trust, to build those relationships for them to give you a shot. And I think sometimes if you've been in the transactional world of recruitment agency land for a long time, you'll find it very frustrating. You can do $1 million in agency world of, sending a couple of resumes and having some conversations here and there. And you could be very happy doing that. And you can be incredibly successful doing that. You can do double, 3 times that in search, but it takes you sometimes a little bit longer to be able to get the whale. We call it the whale, right? And that's what you're looking for. But it might only be 6 or 7, maybe 10 roles a year. And sometimes that freaks people out a little bit because they're just not used to that type of engagement. And you shouldn't think about it as you're going to earn $3 million in your first year, because it's just not going to happen. It takes time to build those relationships. But once it sinks in and once you have that rhythm and you've got your client list and you know what your pipeline looks like, it's just about managing relationships. I fell into executive search just like many people fall into recruitment. I was a journalist before, and that's what I trained. I worked for the Sunday Times. And I went and did my MBA in the UK. And as good MBA students do, you go and interview for management consultancy roles and banks and whatever else. And it was just at the tipping point of the GFC, and no banks were hiring. I think KPMG in London let go of like 15,000 people. And so management consultants, they were, everyone was in the market looking for jobs. I remember going and interviewing for an opportunity, and the search firm, said to me, "Why don't you come and join us?" And I said, "What do you do?" And the rest is history, right? But you get hooked by it. My first role that I did was the governor of the Bank of England. I was carrying the bag, so I was an associate. But, we ended up hiring Mark Carney, who's now the Prime Minister of Canada. So the opportunities that this industry has allowed me over the years has been phenomenal. And, I look back on it, and it's taken me and my family all over the world, and it's been an incredible journey. And it's one of these things I just kind of fell into, at the time. So again, the misconception is, we're all flying business class around the world and whatever else. And, that's just not the case at all. If you do your points properly and you pay for your tax, on the Amex maybe. Yeah. But other than that, it's pretty standard. It always just comes down to the operating at a different type of conversation, realizing that you might not get anything back for a long period of time. And sometimes that's just very confronting to a lot of recruiters.
It's just so different to, I guess, the traditional recruitment world where it's about weekly KPIs, weekly targets, like the thought process is just on such a smaller time frame.
Yes.
So it would be so hard to get used to that.
100%.
Yeah.
I can see why a lot of people would struggle on that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. We've got KPIs and stuff, but it's not granular. It's not how many phone calls did you make today. It's what's the value you've added to your clients this week? Have you taken that conversation forward? Have you increased that relationship? If you're targeting an account and you've met, I don't know, the HRD, that's not enough. You need to have met the CEO, HRD, CFO, CTO, CIO, everyone that has some sort of touch point at a senior level. You've got to have met them, and that takes time.
Yep.
I'm a firm believer that the more people talking about you around the table, the quicker they're going to buy from you.
Yep.
Right. So if you've identified an organization that you want to go after, you cannot just meet one person because that person will leave and then you're back to step one again. Need to be able to, and that comes again with preparation. I spoke about it earlier. Having a conversation with a CTO of an organization is very different to having a conversation with the CFO because their priorities are a bit different. So you need to have been well read in order to be credible in that room to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
Yeah. I would imagine a lot of the roles that you would end up working on aren't just going to be roles that pop up on Seek, right? So is there?
They're never on Seek.
Yeah. So is it all just about, like, once again, if you're building those networks and you're having the conversations, is it kind of, your pipeline is what is coming up? Like, how do you even find that?
It's about being there before it happens.
Yep.
So that's the point of networking. It's not the reactive side. It's being proactive around getting into those conversations before the problem arises. So you are there offering solutions before there is a problem. So a lot of times CEOs, they know where the gaps are going to be in the next few months/years because they're at the pulse of their organization. A lot of the time, they're not surprised when their CIO comes and resigns. They've seen the writing on the wall, right? But what good executives do is that they manage backwards. So if they feel like, for instance, their CFO is not performing or there might be a flight risk, 6 months before, they've already started a confidential process in the background. And if you're any exec and you think that your job is safe, execs in the background are mapping the market in case you arrive one day and resign, right? So that they know exactly where people are and what it's going to take for those people to leave. So that's the interesting piece. And a lot of execs that come to me from a candidate perspective, they've said, I've just seen my dream job. And someone, just went on LinkedIn and updated their profile with my dream job. And I didn't even know if that role was out in the market. And I said, well, what did you do about it? You just told me it was your dream job. Did you go and find the CEO? Did you go speak to the CFO or whoever it is? And they're like, no, we're just waiting for an advert. It's not the way it works, right? These things are happening in dark corners and, offices way before it even gets to market.
Yeah. So I would imagine, like, if you're a CFO, CEO, someone at that level, there's definitely, it's advantageous to have maybe someone like yourself or a few others that you're building relationships as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My clients are my candidates and my candidates are my clients. It has to be. They go hand in hand. And if C-suite executives or any executives at GM level, head of, whatever it may be, if you are only reaching out to search firms and recruiters at any level when you need a job, you're too late because you haven't built the relationship. It's a two-way street. So how am I supposed to hunt on your behalf if we haven't built a relationship? If I've known a CFO for 5 years and all of a sudden he or she's on the market, I'm going to go full on to try and find that person some conversations to be had because we know each other, we trust each other, the rapport is there. But if you've just sent me your resume, who are you? So it's important. And I know people have got their day jobs and everything else, but it's networking. You've got to be able to take time to go have a 30-minute coffee and to keep your relationships and your networks going. And you guys would have heard this. I don't know how many times people come up to me and say, I've been in this role for 5 years. It's been so hectic. I've lost all my network and relationship and I have to start from day one. I look and I go, great, you've put a lot of time and effort into your role, but what about you? Right? What about you from a personal perspective? You're not looking after yourself in your career. And now you're going to sit for the next 6 to 12 months trying to figure out how to get a new job. And processes take long.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mate, that's familiar for me. I had a conversation this week of someone who's been 10 years in one agency. When I said, what do you think? Is there anyone out there that you look at and think, yeah, I'd love to work there or, XYZ kind of business? And They said, I've pretty much just had my head down focusing on my own role for the last 10 years. And that's fine. I mean, they've been really successful in that. But like you said, right now, they're at the probably peak of their powers in terms of their career. And it's just no relationships there to leverage off.
Yeah.
So
where to next?
Yeah.
And then it becomes an inflection point, and they start looking inward and saying, what am I all about and where to next? And that's an interesting, because I was reflecting on something about that yesterday, about imposter syndrome. And a lot of people in our industry have it massively, right? They're very successful, but then it gets to a point where maybe things go down or south or downward or whatever it may be. And all of a sudden they're like, should I be here? And should I be doing this? And you guys know Stephen Bartlett. I'm sure you know Stephen Bartlett. I mean, I don't agree with everything he does. I think a lot of what he does is clickbait stuff, but he is a firm believer of you've got to lean in to imposter syndrome, because it's the idea of, if you are too comfortable in your environment and your situation, you have no room to grow and change. So you've got to lean into those bad, terrible moments, because in those moments is where you find yourself and where you grow. And a lot of people come to that realization too late. For job candidates, for instance, they've resigned or they've been let go or there's a restructure, and then all of a sudden they're going through that moment. But it takes them 3 months to ramp up, to get the confidence again, to then approach the market. And by that time, things have moved. The market moves pretty quickly. And if you wanted to get into a process now, it's taking 3 months to get to a close, which means you're already 6 months out of a job.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a really good segue. I think the next question was like, what's time frame wise, what's an average process?
It depends. Depends on the role, depends on the complexity of the role, depends on if it's local, international, regional, in terms of candidates. Really depends on the diaries of the key stakeholders and hiring managers, and getting into their diaries to take briefs for updates, etc. But if I had to put it down, you're probably getting to a shortlist within 4 weeks. And that's a shortlist of qualified candidates who are ready to go. They know about the opportunity and they're good to go. Obviously, there are touch points along the way. There's updates and long lists and everything else, but usually it's within 4 weeks. And then you start interviewing, and it depends on how many candidates you're interviewing. Let's say there's 4 candidates. Start that process. How many stakeholders are involved? We try and get as least stakeholders as possible, because otherwise you're in 6 different interviews and it just blows out the time. But hopefully that should all be done within a month, maybe 6 weeks, to get down to your final person. So what's that? Let's say 6 to 8 weeks to get to your final candidate. And then 3-month notice period after that. The longest I've seen is a 6-month notice period. It was a CEO of a bank. Deputy CEO of a bank. So they literally kicked him out and told him to go home for 6 months. They paid for everything. And then he came back. That's the longest I've seen. But yeah, to get to that last sort of final point, I'd say probably, somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks, if it all goes to plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, coming back to your point on that transition between contingent world and exec search world, is that might seem too long in terms of a process. But it comes down to being able to manage the people and being able to influence throughout that process. And I think that's a key point to bring up, is because then it just becomes about stakeholders and relationships, and being able to influence, to keep that conversation going, to keep people in the process for that long. But it's about managing risk as well. I believe that the longer, and this is going to be a contentious issue, but I believe the longer an executive is part of an interview process, the better it is, because they can manage their risk better along that timeline. They can have conversations with their partners and their spouses. They can talk to their kids if that's they're old enough to have that conversation. They can speak to their mentors. They can have time to themselves to think about whether this is the right thing for them or not. And it might get to a point where they pull out. And actually, it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
Because the last thing I want for my client is 6 months down the line, that hire doesn't work because they haven't managed their risk properly. So yeah, some people say, time kills deals. If you're able to manage the process effectively, then it could lead to a much better outcome.
Yeah. And that's just that different mindset. Like if you're coming from traditional recruitment, you have to get past.
Yeah. It's Monday. You need a deal by the end of Friday because it's the last day of the month and you have to close it. Like there's obviously, financial pressures and commitments that you have to make in any business, right? That's just commercial reality, but just that mindset of that longer term play and the relationship.
Yeah. And I think sometimes maybe recruitment agencies need to get out of this whole idea that you go from month to month or quarter to quarter because life doesn't work that way, right? What a different mindset would change is if you had maybe 6 month, what are they called? Pipeline sales cycle, right? So let's see how much you can close in 6 months. And then that's your target. Most people have 12 months in the exec search world because we know that it's not going to close today because we have tough conversations with candidates and clients. The negotiating piece at the end, when we're negotiating basics, sign-ons, LTIs, trying to move things from this side to that side and tax, and it can get crazy. And I don't know how long, I've spent time talking to candidates, tax accountants about the offer. And I'm just like, this is mental. What am I doing? I'm explaining all of this to a tax accountant at PwC. You should be explaining it to me. But that it's not short. The timeline on that is blown out considerably. So, if you've got a target of 2 million and you can do it over a year, you can manage that. If you break it down, you can manage that pretty well.
One thing I want to ask you, when we were preparing for this, we were talking about obviously sales process and the like from there. You said the buzz for you is signing clients up, not the actual placement of the role. Take us through that mentality.
Yeah. It sounds terrible, doesn't it?
I like it.
Different.
This is different. I like it because I think it probably comes back to the difference, right? Between exec search and that traditional contingent recruitment where, great, I'll give you a contingent, I'll give you a role, work it. Doesn't actually mean anything, right? Because you haven't got any money in the bank, you're not being paid. They could place it themselves. Yeah. There's a million other factors, right? And you only get paid obviously when you make the placement. But I was just like, it just stood out for me. So I'm just really curious to understand that mindset.
I think, for me, the buzz is definitely when I'm able to, turn no's into yeses from a client perspective. I think it's because it takes so long to get to that point. You've put in, if you look backwards, you've put in so much hard graft and planning to get to that point where they've signed up. And I think for me, that's where the buzz is being able to move a client from an absolute cold outreach call, right, 2 years ago or 12 months ago, whatever it is, to now them signing a $300,000 deal. That process for me gets me out of bed. The other part is just, it's part of the process. Now we're on site, we're working, that's just, we've got to deliver. And I think that's the other key thing is we have to deliver. They've paid us, have to. So,
and this isn't, these aren't just like a small, upfront third retainer type fee, maybe 10 grand up front, is it? They're a bit bigger than that.
Listen, at the end of the day, I think if a client is paying you up front, whether it's 10 grand or 100 grand, I think the concept there is still the same. You've got to deliver.
Yeah.
You can't turn around and say, oh, sorry, 3 months later, we couldn't do it. We couldn't find it. It's just not going to happen. You have to deliver. So the pressure is on to, deliver on that. But going back to your point, for me, it's the hunt and the buzz I get is definitely, when they sign on the dotted line to begin.
Yeah.
If I speak to my researcher and my admin team, they get the buzz from placing the candidate at the end because they are, not that I'm not involved in the candidate process, I absolutely am, because the shortlist will never become a shortlist without my rubber stamp on it, but that's their specific role in the process, is making sure we get from day one to placement. So they get the buzz at the end, whereas mine is just before that day one, right? And Yeah, do I not sleep the night before? Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I think something's coming, but it might be sort of on the edge, I try my hardest to try and influence it. What else can I do that's not overly salesy that can push this in my direction? And I think that gives me the buzz as opposed to the other sort of long, drawn-out process side of things. But then, going on to the candidate side, I truly do believe that if we're good at what we do, the art of what we do is turning the no's into yeses. So being able to manage the risk of candidates who are maybe very, very good for the job and the clients really want them, but they're on the fence, is being able to have built that relationship so much, that personal relationship with them over the couple of months, that we're able to turn those some of those problems that they're thinking about in their head, turn them into yeses. And that, again, that's also pretty good buzz. Yeah.
Excellent. What about, I guess one thing I wanted to cover off, and you're pretty active on LinkedIn and just building content there. How important is personal brand? That's something, from anyone we've interviewed at any sort of level, the real successful people in recruitment, regardless of, what sector, they've all got a personal brand in their space. How important is that for you, and how do you actually build it in exec search?
Yeah, I think it's become a lot more prevalent over the last few years, maybe since COVID, because everybody went online in COVID time. So I know that whole, LinkedIn, what do they call themselves? LinkedIn influencers and top voices.
Yep.
Everyone tries to get that little blue badge. Whether it pushes your brand forward or not, I'm not sure. My brand is, I like to build, yes, I'm active on LinkedIn, but I like to build my brand one-on-one. I'm much better one-on-one. A lot of people go to conferences and these networking events and there's 100 people in the room. I hate that. I can't. My anxiety levels go through the roof.
But we're exactly the same. We were talking about this.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Right. And then I talk to one person and I really like the conversation, and then I don't leave that person because I want to know everything about that person. And then I've realized, this was a waste of time for the reason being there, right? So I love to be able to rather build a personal relationship with, one person or two people across from a desk. Where the brand helps is sometimes getting that foot in the door. We think that executives are so busy and they don't read LinkedIn and newsletters and everything else. I think that is also a misconception. I think they're on there a lot more than we realize. I've got a client that I'm trying to sign up desperately at the moment. And every time we talk, he's like, I read your post, really resonates with me. And I was like, why don't you comment? He's like, no, I don't comment. So if you don't get comments, you don't get likes or engagement, I don't think that's the point. And it shouldn't be the point. Don't let all these social media influencers try and push people in the direction like you need this engagement in order for it to be good. I think if it's going to reach the right person, it will reach the right person, whether it's through word of mouth or whatever it may be. But you've got to stand for something. So for me, it's about leadership. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about empathy. It's about authenticity. And I hope that my brand sort of comes through with that. And that's why I try to have those conversations with leaders face to face, is about that, those sort of themes and topics. So as long as it's all sort of authentic along the way, then I think building a brand is a no-brainer, and it kind of has to happen. A lot of executives are starting to build brands online as well. A lot of the time, I think they're getting it wrong because they're not doing it themselves, but they're getting teams to do it for them. They've got a big office of the CEO that manages the PR for them. And they've just got to be at a point at a single time to do, a video or an article or something. But the rest of the time, it's kind of just done by their office. And I think that's probably maybe the wrong way to do it because it's a bit impersonal. I love execs who just put a random personal post up. Like, it just shows so much vulnerability and authenticity. And those are the people you want to work with. And those are the people who probably want to work with you too. They want to have the cup of coffee with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, building the brand, again, it's not a short fix. It takes time. And it's not just on LinkedIn. It's got to be on other avenues as well. You've got to hold, you've got to do podcast events. You've got to hold lunches with key speakers. You've got to invite them to breakfast with their peers. You've got to be able to add value to their life that is on brand to you. And I think that's an important thing a lot of people maybe don't do, or maybe don't have either the time or the confidence to be able to do.
Yeah.
You know, to host, we were just talking about the beautiful scenery outside here, to host a panel interview with execs and 100 people in the room, you've got to be pretty good at what you do, and you've got to have the confidence behind you to back yourself.
Yeah.
And I think, I think people have more ability and more confidence than they think. They've just got to push through it. And I think there's a lot of negative people out there who like to sort of come down on people for putting content out and whatever else. But I think if you go through that noise and just focus on yourself and focus on what you're good at, I think a lot of people can do a lot more amazing things with that. I mean, look at what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Right? It's a great platform.
Yeah, it is. And I think I don't know, like I tend, you've been in recruitment for a long time. So you would have seen a lot of change and evolution over the years. I tend to think that the recruitment industry is probably pretty reluctant to change in general. Like a lot of what the process and systems that are in the industry now have been around forever. Like there's not a huge amount of innovation. But I think the world's changed so much that recruitment is going to have to change one way or the other. I don't want to be one of these people that says recruitment's broken, needs to be fixed, all that, right? Like that's not what I'm getting at. But I think the online presence, the personal branding, and a different approach to marketing is something that is going to be really important over the next 5 to 10.
Yeah,
for sure.
Spot on. It's like what you said earlier, right? People buy off people.
Yeah,
at the end of
I
the day,
agree.
right? Like you have to have the expertise and the credibility behind that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's those personal relationships to be known, to be liked, to be trusted over a long period of time. And that takes, the advice you'd have for, the 22, 23-year-olds at the start of their career. It's just time.
And get out.
Right?
Get out and about. Don't be
100%.
stuck in front of a laptop.
100%.
And that's a key thing. I was taught many, many years ago that my managing director at the time said, never eat alone. And it's always stuck with me, right? So when I was building my network and my career, I would have breakfast with a client. I'd have lunch with a client or candidate, and I'd drinks after work with lunch or candidate. Never eat alone, right? And that you're able to build your relationships, your little black book, that it just kept moving your network forward. And when I first arrived in Australia, that's what I did. I had zero network here. And I just went back to basics. And I just went, okay, I've got to meet 3 new people every day, right? I gave myself that kind of task. And that was all you need to do, just meet 3 new people that you feel are going to move your network forward.
Yeah.
And that compounds over the week, over a month, over a quarter, years.
Things happen.
Yeah.
So
where to then for the future of, exec search, right? Obviously with, everyone's talking about AI and, how much that's going to impact the sector. What are your thoughts? Not just on AI, sorry. Just
no,
in
that's
general.
okay. I think the best executive search and recruitment consultants out there are going to be able to leverage AI for their own advantage and their own benefit. We're doing it at the moment, right? So for instance, I use AI every single day for due diligence, for market research, for information on clients and companies that I need to approach and attack. So I do that every day. And AI does that for me. So before I wake up, it's there so that my day is already planned for. My researchers use AI in the same way, but from a candidate sourcing perspective, which frees them up to have conversations, to talk to people, to meet people. So if my researcher is working on 6 assignments, for instance, she can only speak to 8 people a day, right? So the other 5 assignments are being resourced and sourced in the background using our AI platform. So it's making her life easier and making us more effective and efficient for our clients. Because at the end of the day, it's all about just servicing the clients. So I think the more we lean into it, I think the better it's going to be for the industry, the better it will be from a people-people relationship, because people buy from people. We keep saying this. But I think the trust element is going to go through the roof because nobody trusts AI at the moment, whether it's content or avatars or people phoning you, and it's like an AI voice, whatever. Like the amount of distrust out there is immense at the moment, which makes our job easier because we are people. And if you are a person phoning another person or wanting to meet another person for a cup of coffee, that is gold at the moment. Do all the boring stuff. Let AI do the boring stuff so you can actually enjoy being a professional networker, because that's what you're all about, getting out there and increasing your network. So it's coming, it's here. That's just part of the process. Is search and recruitment going to die? No, it's not. I truly believe we are only at the prime of what our industry is able to do for clients and companies and candidates. I was at that pinnacle moment when I joined recruitment world, when LinkedIn was becoming like a big thing, right? And it was getting bigger, and everyone said, "Oh, recruitment's dead because of LinkedIn." I reckon recruiters are LinkedIn's biggest customer.
Oh, easily.
By far.
Well, they've got a product, LinkedIn Recruiter. So
yeah,
built for recruiters.
I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship now. One can't rely without the other one. So it'll grow. I think the bigger companies will struggle to be big in terms of headcount. I think that might be an issue going forward in the next couple of years. So if you've got 50, 60, 100 people working for you, that might not be the case in a couple of years' time. I think the growth of boutique agencies where there's 2, 3, 5 people working, I think that's a sweet spot where you're able to build really nice relationships with clients, and you're able to give a more intimate feel for your clients and your candidates. We've all seen the Recruitment United and the growth of one-man agencies, and I think, again, going back to my previous comment, our industry is so good for entrepreneurs wanting a good life-work balance, to their life, and it's just it's a lovely industry if you're able to do well in it. But it's also an incredibly frustrating industry, as we all know, and it can go south pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And again, I come back to relationships, and I think that is the key thing. I think the going forward, the ones who will do very, very well in our industry are the ones who have solid relationships, and they've built those relationships over time, and they've built them face to face. Those are the ones who are going to survive whatever comes next.
Great. Couple of quick fire questions to finish off.
Fireside.
We'll go with 2. If you could go back and talk to yourself from when you first started in the recruitment industry, what advice would you give your younger self?
Work smarter, not harder. Yeah.
Good.
There were days when you're doing stupid KPIs, 12, 14-hour days, and then you realize none of that was pushing your business and your value forward. So it was just an old school director telling you what worked for him in 1980 would work for you now. And a lot of it did work, but it just wasn't where, even back then, it wasn't where the industry was going. So absolutely, work smarter, not harder.
Yep. Final question. Your kids come up to you and tell you that they want to start in recruitment. What do you tell them?
I'll throw them off the balcony. If they ever wanted to join the industry, it would be under my wing.
Yep.
So I would absolutely either hire them into our business or start my own business as a family-run business. And I'll teach them the dark arts through someone who's done it for 15, 20 odd years. But again, it's a superb industry. And, if you've been able to do well in it, for me and my family, it's been incredible. It's taken us all over the world. We've met amazing people along the way, present company included. And it's just been phenomenal for us. And I when I first got into it, I just thought, I was a 24-year-old, 25-year-old or whatever it was when I got into it. And I was sitting across from, governors of banks. And I thought, how is this possible? Like, why am I even here? Like, I don't deserve to be here. And it's just grown from there. And the confidence and, the ability to be able to have those conversations has grown since then. And, I keep just going back to, it's it's an industry that rewards consistency.
Yeah.
And if you're in it and you're having those good conversations, it will be phenomenal.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Mate, thank you for your time today. You've given us, I think, some really good insights into the world of exec search and the dark arts, as you call it. I like that. But thank you so much for coming on, providing some insights to us and our listeners.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a great platform to be able to talk about it. And I don't think it is worlds apart from what a lot of people think.
Yep.
But I think you mentioned it earlier, it's a change in mindset.
Yep.
And if you're willing to make that change in mindset, it can be a beautiful pivot in your career.
Mate, thank you. And that's this episode of The Special Sauce done and dusted.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Good man.